Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. Pierre Poilievre's housing proposal took centre stage in the House of Commons today. Unveiled Monday, the Conservative plan would eliminate the GST on new home sales under $1 million. A proposal that Conservatives say would allow potential buyers to save thousands and boost home builds. It's also a policy that Pierre Poilievre says Canadians should vote on in what he's now calling a housing tax election.
West End Builders Association stated that my common sense Conservative plan to axe the sales tax on new homes under $1 million is, and I quote, the most significant housing announcement made in the past 2 decades. Removing the GST shows leadership to cut crippling levels of taxation on new housing, puts money directly back in the pockets of Canadians while combating the housing crisis. Why won't the Prime Minister listen to the people who build homes so that we can reverse the crisis he caused? Why don't we axe the sales tax on new homes today?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You know, it shows leadership, Mr. Speaker, taking seriously the safety of Canadians.
Exactly.
Mr. Speaker, the RCMP has concluded that the government of India was involved in the killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil, in extortion, in violence, in drive-by shootings, in home invasions, and the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada refuses to get his security clearance so that he can keep Canadians safe, can even keep his fellow MPs safe. That's why I've asked our security services to find a way to share some information with him so maybe he can do at least a part of his job.
Well, joining us now is the Government House Leader Karina Gould. Ms. Gould, thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
You know, we have a lot to talk about, not a lot of time, but I do want to start with what happened in the House of Commons today, because here you have Pierre Poilievre asking the Prime Minister about the GST on housing, and instead we heard Justin Trudeau respond with questions about Pierre Poilievre's refusal to get security clearance. Your party says Canadians want to see their government work, but can it work if the Prime Minister does not answer the questions being asked of him during QP?
Well, look, Michael, I mean, there's a really big question as to why Mr. Poilievre is not getting his security clearance. I mean, this is a man who is asking Canadians for their trust, to trust him enough to be Prime Minister, but he doesn't want to do the basic work of getting a security clearance to protect our national security. I mean, he's at the point now where he's saying that he would compromise the national security of Canadians, of informants, of security agents, of our security institutions to protect himself or to protect his party or to protect something. I mean, the question is he's hiding something and he's just refusing to be honest with Canadians. And so I think the Prime Minister's responses were incredibly important. This is something that is a matter of deep concern to all of us as Canadians. You know, it was just a couple of weeks ago that the RCMP came out and said that they have, you know, clear indications that there has been interference by India in Canada, that there have been people who, a Canadian citizen has been murdered, and there has been, you know, extortion and a whole bunch of crime associated with this that directly impacts the security of Canadians. And Mr. Poilievre doesn't want to know about it, and he doesn't want to talk about it. And that should be of extraordinary concern to every single Canadian, that he would rather hide something about himself than put the everyday security of Canadians and our national security first.
But does it create a bad optic, though? And I take what you're saying, because the security issue is something that's been raised more than once already. But here we have a key question about housing and making it more affordable. Again, if you're trying to prove relevance to Canadians, does it look bad for your party by not answering those questions?
Well, look, we have a very strong record when it comes to housing. I mean, when our first mandate in 2017, we put forward the National Housing Strategy, and we have put forward, you know, really important measures to make housing more affordable and to build more homes. And the Prime Minister did answer a number of those questions when it came to housing affordability. And what he did is he pointed out that what Mr. Poilievre often does, and what he's done in this instance, is he doesn't tell the full story. I mean, you know, he's talking about one element of his plan, but in order to do that, he also has to cut billions of dollars from communities who need that money to build the infrastructure, to reduce the red tape, to actually enable those homes to be built. And so the Prime Minister absolutely answered the question a number of times, but he posed a really important question back to Mr. Poilievre, and that is, why will he not get his security clearance? What is it that he's hiding?
You know, as you and I talk, it has been very interesting to watch the House since the return in September. And one issue right now that has been percolating for a month is this Conservative point of privilege. And for that to change, either your party, your government needs to produce unredacted documents on the former Green Fund, or you as government leader work with other parties to end that portion of debate. Are you pursuing either option seriously right now?
Look, what the Conservatives are doing in the House of Commons right now is just plain wrong. They are trying to use their extraordinary powers, and they are abusing those powers of the House of Commons, of parliamentarians, to get around due process, to get around the judicial process in Canada. Just yesterday in the Hill Times, a former senior official in the Parliamentary Law Clerk's Office said it's time for them to admit they were wrong and to get on with the business of governing. He said this is an abuse of power, and it sets an incredibly dangerous precedent for Parliament to request documents not for its own use, but to be given to a third party. And he said that that could actually create a constitutional issue, and that the courts would have the ability to rule against that. So, you know, it's time for the Conservatives to stop playing these games, and quite frankly, they're dangerous games, because they're playing their political games on the backs of Canadians. They're playing with the rights of Canadians. They're playing with our democratic institutions and the very important separation of powers in our country for their own political vendettas, and that's not okay. And frankly, I would expect that if the situation were reversed, I would hope that if the Conservatives were in power and they had an opposition party that's doing what they were doing, they would be acting the same way that we are, because we have an obligation to protect people's rights, to support due process, and to respect the very important separation of powers that we have in this country. And frankly, I think that's what Canadians expect of us. So what the Conservatives are doing is just plain wrong. They need to stop so that we can get on with the business of governing.
Well, it does lead us to an important question right now, because the level of debate, people are watching across the country, not impressed by what's happening in the House. It does raise the speculation of possible prorogation. Will that happen anytime soon?
No. No, look, Michael, we are here to work for Canadians. There is only one political party in the chamber behind me that is trying to make a mockery of this place, and that does not have respect for our Parliament. It does not have respect for our democracy. And what that means is the Conservative Party of Canada and its members of Parliament and its leader do not have respect for Canadians. Because ultimately what we do in this place is about standing up for the rights of Canadians. It's about working for Canadians. And it is only the Conservative members of Parliament who are making a mockery of the work that we are supposed to be doing here for Canadians. And quite frankly, they should be ashamed. And Canadians should be, you know, concerned about what they are doing here, because they're abusing the powers, the extraordinary powers granted to members of Parliament, not to do parliamentary work, but to try and go around due process and the really important legal structures that we have that protect Canadians in our country.
Minister Gould, thank you for this. Really appreciate the time this evening.
My pleasure. Always good to talk to you.
And you.